Hello, I'm staying on my friend's farm in Cambridgeshire, and yesterday I went out and set up camp in the front garden and painted the farmhouse. It was a gorgeous day and the farm is in a beautiful spot. This is the view that I wanted to paint, the front of the house. And I borrowed a blanket and got all my art stuff out on it. I decided to do a splodge and scribble painting again, and so this is the splodge layer using watercolour paints. I know I probably say it every time I do one of these kinds of paintings, but it's so much fun and it's so relaxing just being able to throw down watercolour in vaguely the right areas. And here's Blitz coming to keep me company. This is where I've started to do the scribble detail, so I've put in coloured pencil for the house details so far. And here's the finished picture where I added more coloured pencil to the trees and foreground, and also some Faber-Castell gelatos. Next, I wanted to have a go at doing a drawing in my Stilman & Burns Nova sketchbook. I used washi tape to block out an area and then did a pencil sketch. Then I started adding colour with Caran D'Ache Neocolor 2s. I really started struggling with them though because the sun was melting them and they became really thick and claggy. So I moved to a shadier spot and finished off the picture when they'd cooled down a little bit. I used a white Shuttle Arts Tempera stick for the window frames, and it's quite a chunky stick so I couldn't get much detail, but I quite like how it turned out in the end. I found that the white Caran D'Ache Neocolor 2 wasn't really thick or opaque enough to get quite this white effect. Sorry, I'm just speeding up taking off the washi tape. So in a lot of ways, because the Neocolor 2s were so warm, it was more like using oil pastels. I've not used them in this super thick kind of way before. Hello, it's another gorgeous morning on the farm and I've come outside. I thought this morning that I'd have a play around with making coloured gouache out of white gouache and my watercolour half pans. So I've got all my stuff out. I've got a white plate and I've got this Holbein white gouache. And then I've got my watercolours. I've had a go at making coloured gouache out of white gouache and watercolours before, but I was using tube watercolour paint then, so I'm just going to experiment now and see if I can get concentrated enough colour using these. I'm a bit limited, I'm afraid, because I don't have any stand for my phone to record with, so I'll just have to hold it one-handed and show you what I'm doing as best as possible. So I've squeezed out some white gouache and I'm going to attempt to make some colours from my surroundings. So I'll start with a vaguely sky coloured blue. I've got quite a thick amount of ultramarine blue on my brush, because bearing in mind all the colours that we mix the gouache with are going to be lightened up considerably and turned into the pastel version. So that's quite a pale sky blue. That's already about as runny as I would want it to be, so if I add any more blue, which I'll try and do now, I need to make sure I don't add much more water to the mixture. So dry my brush as much as possible and pick up as concentrated blue as I can. The sun's already pretty hot today, so this is going to be drying out quite quickly. So that's a blue that I'm pretty happy with. What I'm going to do now then is mix up a palette of colours on this plate, and I'll have a play around with how dark I'm able to get the colours. Oh dear, that's my paintbrush in my herb tea. So here are the colours I mixed up. This was with Winsor & Newton Permanent Rose. This one was with Schmincke's French Ultramarine. This was with Sennelier's Warm Sepia. This was with a mixture of Rembrandt's Dusk Yellow and Daniel Smith's Undersea Green. This was just the Undersea Green. This was A. Gallo's Transparent Red Oxide, and this one was with Isero Mindy Green. So they're very pastel colours. I'll link to a video in the description box below where I did this experiment before, but using tube paints, and I was able to achieve much deeper colours. But it's perhaps nice to know that you can achieve a decent range of colours just with white gouache paint if you've already got watercolours. These have already pretty much dried out, but they'll re-wet fine. I've taped off a little area in my Stilman & Burns sketchbook, and I'll do a little painting there now. I've done a rough pencil sketch, and I've included the side of the house and the flower beds in front of it. So you can see that the paint re-wets fine, and it's still able to keep most of its opacity. This is one coat on the sky, and I'm going over it a bit more here. I mixed up a few more colours as I went along, and I found that using my Marie Blue Payne's Grey worked quite well for some of the darker mixes. And then here's my little picture. I'll just take the washi tape off now. I didn't try to get too detailed with this. I quite liked the blocky look of it. So I didn't spend a great deal of time on it, but I think that was a fairly successful experiment using the white gouache and the watercolour paints from pans. Thanks ever so much for joining me again. Bye!